This happened so long ago that a lot of details are a little blurry. It's not like it happened yesterday. I'll try my best to fill in the smaller details with how I best remember things. It was the last day of school, and I was in 4th grade. At our school, 4th graders still had to be picked up by their parents. 5th graders could walk home alone. My mom always picked me up on the last day of school. My friend Juan and I had planned a playdate to celebrate the last day. Juan wasn't in my class that year, but we'd been friends since kindergarten. He was in a different dismissal hallway than me. After school, we lined up single file and walked to the exit door at the end of the hall, where we waited outside with our teacher, Ms. Perez. I waited for Juan's dad to appear among the crowd of parents coming in and out of the parking lot next to the doors. Then I heard my name. Pedro, Pedro. I looked over and saw a man waving at me as he approached. He introduced himself as Juan's uncle and said he was picking me up. I went over to Ms. Perez and said, "I'm being picked up." She asked, "Where is he, sweetie?" And I pointed to Juan's uncle, who waved at Ms. Perez. Ms. Perez dismissed me, and I went with the man. He led us through the crowd and was a very quick and jittery talker, like he spoke fast and had a bit of a stutter. He was walking incredibly fast. It was almost hard to keep up with him with my backpack on. He explained to me that his brother, or Juan's dad, was working later than expected, so he was driving me home. We got to his car, which was a dark red hatchback-type car from what I remember, and it took me this long to acknowledge the giant elephant in the room. Where was Juan? Why weren't we picking him up too? The man turned to look at me in the back seat and said that Juan was already at his house. I was shy around people I didn't know, especially adults, and I wasn't one to openly speak my mind if I was confused, but I was very confused. This was making less and less sense. The whole drive, the man kept yapping, telling stories of his days in elementary school, asking me questions like what sports I played and what we were learning in class. If I had to guess, we were in the car for like 10 minutes, which honestly, for our town where houses were right on top of each other, was a while. My house was a 5-minute walk away from the school. We were definitely in an area I wasn't familiar with. When he parked the car in front of his house looked pretty normal to me from what I remember. He let us inside, shut the door, and locked it behind us. It was really dark inside the place because all the curtains were shut. It almost felt like it was nighttime in there, especially because the only source of light was a dim lamp in the corner of the room. He then looked at me and smiled. I said, "Where's Juan?" And he started acting really jittery and nervous. He said something like, "Oh, I think he's downstairs playing video games. Give me a second. Wait here." He then disappeared into a nearby room, and I heard a door open and then footsteps descending into a basement. I know my heart was already racing. I knew I was in danger. I went to the door to quietly try to open it, but I couldn't. It had some kind of lock that must have needed a key for. I really started to panic now, yet I still probably held out a little bit of hope that Juan would be coming up those stairs, but I knew the chances of that were slim. I regretted entering that house. I did the only thing I could think to do. I went to the kitchen and found a phone hung on the wall. I picked it off the receiver and dialed 911. The first thing I said when they answered was in a whisper, "Please come to this house. I've been kidnapped." They heard me, they acknowledged me, but I didn't say another word. I hid the phone under a towel in the corner of the room with 911 still on the line. I hurried back to where the man left me, as I already heard his footsteps coming back upstairs. Then he called my name saying, "Come down. Juan is down here." Then there was a pause. He repeated my name, and when I didn't answer, he came up the stairs fully to look at me. He asked me if I was okay. I felt so sick and I was so scared. I hated myself for walking into the situation and not being wiser. I asked in a very scared voice if I could leave, and I remember the change in his face. His fake friendly smile disappeared as he realized that I was no longer falling for this. He walked closer to me in a gentle manner until he was close enough to grab my wrist aggressively, and he started pulling me towards the basement. I screamed and cried, and he screamed at me, "I'll let you go if you stop and behave." So I listened. I went down the stairs, and halfway down, the door slammed shut behind me, and I heard it lock. I walked fully down the stairs to this empty, unfinished basement with a concrete floor and one singular support beam in the middle of the room. There was a depressing yellow glow in the room from one exposed light bulb hanging on the ceiling. If there was a place you'd imagine kidnapped children to go, This would be it. I heard his heavy footsteps upstairs. You could hear everything in this house. I don't know what he was doing, but I heard him walking around for a while. Then he came to the basement door, opened it, and he called down asking if I'm hungry. I replied no. I didn't want him going into the kitchen and seeing the missing phone. He shut the door and locked it again. I sat down there waiting with my heart in my throat, and then I heard it. The doorbell ringing 3 times from upstairs, followed by banging sounds, which were definitely the sounds of police banging on the door. I refrained from screaming until I heard the front door open, but I never heard the man's footsteps approach the door. The doorbell kept ringing, and I kept hearing the bangs. This went on for some time until I heard a really loud bang sound, and then multiple heavy footsteps and multiple screaming voices. I started screaming for help as loud as I could at the top of the stairs, banging on the door. The door was unlocked, and a police officer on the other side grabbed hold of me and hurried me outside. There were at least 3 cop cars outside. I had to tell everything to 2 of the cops outside as we waited for my parents to show up. The man from inside was brought outside and into a cop car in handcuffs, and that was the last time I ever saw him. When my parents arrived on the scene, my mom was bawling her eyes out. There had already been a whole uproar at the school as cops were called, and Juan's dad realized what happened. This man was a work associate of Juan's father. When he somehow learned that Juan's dad would be picking up Juan and me from school on the last day, he seized the opportunity to do what he did. A complete sicko. I don't know how he found out what I looked like. As I got older, I never really asked for more details because I try not to think about it. My mom went to counseling with me for months after this incident. Let's just say my parents didn't have kind words for Ms. Perez, not verifying if I actually knew the person picking me up. If I didn't think to call the police before he basically threw me in that basement, I know for a fact I'd be dead right now. This was like 17 years ago. That man might be out of prison for all I know. This happened back in my junior year of high school, so around 2008. It was the last day of school, June 10th, a Friday. A lot of people cut class or left early after lunch. My friends and I, we were among those who left early. It was a stormy, dark day. Originally, a bunch of people from our grade planned to hit the beach, but that was obviously canceled because of the weather. So, my smaller group of friends decided to do something else. There used to be an abandoned elementary school in our town, Bakersfield. It hadn't been used for about 10 years. They were planning to tear it down by the end of the year. We still wanted to do something fun on the last day of school, so we all agreed to break into the building and just mess around exploring. There were no cameras in that old building, and on a stormy day, no one would be outside monitoring the place or anything. So, we all left after lunch. My friend Jake already had a car and his license, so he drove us all to the abandoned school. The school was in the middle of a neighborhood, not on any main roads or anything. There was a back parking lot covered by overgrown bushes and trees on one side, and the walls of the school on the other sides. It was a perfect spot to park and go unnoticed. The place wasn't boarded up or anything. It was just locked up. Jake had a baseball bat in his trunk, so he took it out and smashed one of the windows of the school. I was honestly so nervous that even through the pouring rain, one of the houses over the fence would hear the smashing sound. We all watched and nervously laughed as Jake swung the bat into the window in front of the car. After a few good swings, he pushed away the remaining pieces of glass stuck to the frame with the bat and then waved us over. We one by one climbed through the window into the school. My logic was that the school was being torn down anyway, so what did a broken window matter? Once inside, the window we climbed through was actually one of the windows for a classroom. A lot of stuff was still left in the room, including the desks and some decorations on the walls. Based on the decorations, it looked like we were in a 4th or 5th grade classroom. It was very surreal to be inside what was once an active classroom, now nothing but a cold, dark, and abandoned room collecting dust, waiting to be destroyed. The sounds of thunder and lightning outside added to the surreal feeling of it all. There were no lights on in the building. The power to the place was likely cut completely. We anticipated this, though, and the flashlights on our phones were enough to get around and see. Even without them, it wasn't completely pitch black in there, as some light was still creeping in through the windows and doors. We started traversing the hallways, going from room to room. Each classroom was still full of desks and chairs that hadn't been sat in for probably a decade. We were all in the same classroom when there was a sound that echoed down the hallway and into the classroom. We all went silent and turned off our lights for a moment. After a flash of lightning, we slowly accepted that it was probably nothing and continued on. We just went from room to room as our wet shoes squeaked on the floors. Sneaking around wasn't really possible. A lot of things in the school were visibly decaying. You could really tell no one had stepped foot in there in ages. As we neared the corner of the hall, I turned around just to look back down the other way. At the doorway of one of the classrooms, it looked like there was something sticking out from the classroom. I asked my friends to also look. Their lights might help see what it was. When all four of us were pointing our phone flashlights toward the door, whatever that thing we were seeing retracted into the classroom. All four of us quietly went, "Oh no," among ourselves and started running down the intersecting hallway. We stopped when we were far enough away. It seemed we were in the kindergarten wing now. Then we heard another sound echo from down the hallway. It seemed we weren't alone. But who could be in here was the question. The place was locked up, and every light in the building was off. The sound scared us into going into the first classroom we could find and shutting the door. It was indeed a kindergarten classroom. We were now concerned we'd get in trouble, so we waited in silence with our flashlights off. The rain was still coming down hard, and there was still thunder and lightning crashing every 20 seconds or so. Suddenly, the door to the classroom clicked open, and someone pushed it as it eerily creaked to a fully open position. We didn't see anyone at the doorway, and the hallway was almost pitch black. We all tried our best to stay quiet. Slowly, something appeared through the doorway. It was the shape of a head. We all saw it, and when there was another flash of lightning, we saw what it was. It was someone's head looking into the classroom directly at us. I started apologizing for all of us, saying we were leaving. The person at the doorway didn't move. They motionlessly and almost lifelessly just peered around the doorway into the classroom. Jake asked, "Do you work here?" No response. Jake handed me the bat as he struggled to unlock one of the windows to slide it open just enough to crawl through. He crawled out first, then my other two friends, and I was last. Before I crawled out, I looked back one more time at the head at the doorway. I crawled through as quickly as I could, fearing I'd hear the person run up behind me and grab my legs. Once I was out, I ran to catch up with my friends who were already running back to Jake's car. We drove out of there in a hurry and never looked back. The building was torn down later that year and has since been turned into a park. We never got in trouble for breaking in. To this day, we have no idea if that was some kind of worker or just some random person. Either way, it was extremely creepy behavior on their part. I was a freshman in college when I took this really tough chemistry class. The desks were set up in groups of 4, and I ended up sitting at a middle table on the left side near the end. Next to me was this guy named Jake. He gave off major Reddit moderator vibes. Picture this. He was around 5 feet 8 inches, a bit chubby, and had this patchy, not-so-great beard. Despite his awkwardness, he knew his stuff in chemistry. I guess he was just smart overall. We started talking because he noticed I was struggling in class. He offered to help with my homework and even let me copy off him during tests. There was never any romantic vibe from Jake, probably because he was too shy to flirt in person. Eventually, he asked for my number so he could send me homework stuff. I gave it to him because he was helping me out a lot and didn't seem dangerous, just a bit introverted. Fast forward to the last day of class, and Jake did something unexpected. He asked me out on a date after class. I wasn't attracted to him at all, and our personalities were like night and day. But he had helped me maintain an A throughout the semester, so I had to let him down gently. I made up a story about going away for a couple of weeks and wouldn't be around. He immediately asked what about when I got back. I figured 2 weeks would be enough time for him to lose interest, so I vaguely said I could maybe meet up or something. He replied with a cringy cool and nodded his head. From then until the end of class that day, it was super awkward for me. After class, I left straight for my car and headed home. Since I commuted and didn't live on campus, that was the end of it. It was a Thursday, and my friends from the same school wanted to go out that night, so we hit the town. At some point, I got a text from Jake asking when I was going to Miami. I told my friends all about Jake while we were out, how he got me an A but now wanted a date. They joked that I should just go on the date to be nice. I sarcastically joked back, sure, why not? I planned to respond later, but I was drunk and forgot. The next day, I woke up to 2 follow-up texts from Jake, one with question marks and the next saying I was ignoring him now that I didn't need him anymore. I replied that I was sorry. I was packing because I was going to Miami that day. He replied almost instantly with an okay. Of course, there was no Miami trip, but he didn't need to find that out. Later that night, my friends and I went out again, and while we were out, I got a scary text from Jake saying he thought I was going to Miami that night. I nearly dropped my drink reading it. I showed my friends, and we were all freaked out. I replied asking what he meant, and he said forget it. He didn't like liars. I was genuinely scared at this point that he was stalking me. I looked around the whole bar, but didn't see him anywhere, at least as far as I knew. So, what the heck? I didn't answer him at that point, and I never planned to answer him again. It was late that night, right after I got home and kicked off my shoes, that there were knocks on the door. It had to be like 1 a.m. I asked who it was, and it was Jake on the other side. He said it's him. I wanted to scream. I was home alone. I yelled through the door to leave or my dad would come out and kick his butt. That seemed to work because he didn't knock again. I texted everyone I knew about the situation. My family, all my friends. I was horrified. Some suggested calling the police. I said I would go to the station tomorrow, but tomorrow didn't even come when I received a super long, disgustingly weird and creepy text from Guess Who. I was appalled when I picked up my phone and read it. The text said he was feeling a lot of emotions after being used for months, then lied to and hurt. Anger was one of them. He thought our chemistry in class was off the charts and was hurt that I made up an elaborate Miami trip just to avoid going out with him. He noticed how I looked at him sometimes in class and believed there was some interest there. All he wanted was one date. He wasn't asking for marriage, though he thought he'd make a great husband. He was willing to give me the benefit of the doubt and said he'd be a better catch than the losers around campus. He even offered to come over so we could talk about it in person, but only once. He was crushed to feel like he wasted his semester. I sent this text to everyone, even though it was 3 a.m. I called my dad, who read the message and took charge. He sent Jake a long text and tried calling him like 10 times, but Jake was too much of a coward to pick up. I went to the police station the next day to press charges. They said they'd contact Jake. He didn't answer any of their calls or messages. Jake completely disappeared. I never heard from him again. Between the police trying to contact him and my dad's intimidating messages, that creep probably wet himself. Thankfully, I never saw him on campus again or anywhere else. But dealing with a real stalker was a terrifying experience.